Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is Nothing But Bangers, aka MBB, aka Bangers, back with a video. This time, I'm going to be talking about the No EX format, giving you some deck lists, some game theory, and a little bit of what I've been cooking up on my stream on Twitch, just in case you're interested in seeing me play live. But I want to go ahead and talk about some of the hottest decks in the No EX format. And remember, if you're brand new to this or you're still learning about this, basically you can go into the versus game mode and go to the private games, and if you type the words No EX all together, you will be able to hopefully find somebody pretty quickly that will be playing in the No EX format. There's also a lot of tournaments that are being hosted specifically for this format, so I'm going to give you some of the best decks and some of the hottest techs about these decks, so that way you can be prepared and maybe have some fun playing in a little bit of a different format. So let's get to it. Arguably the best deck, and has been the best deck since the format was even conceived, is Blaines Ninetales. And in this deck, basically your purpose is to find a way to get Ninetales online, so that way you can begin dealing anywhere from 90 up to 120 damage per turn. You have cards like Rapidash and Farfetch that can also attack for 1 energy and can deal massive damage really quickly and early in the game. Now, one of the things that you'll notice when you take a look about this deck list and compare it to other deck lists that are playing Blaine is I do include double Giovanni as well as the double Blaine. Now, the reason behind this is because Giovanni is something that you want to make sure you have access to when you go up against those 100 HP Pokemon. And specifically, sometimes there's going to be matchups where you want to save your Blaine because your Blaine is going to knock out things that directly counter Ninetales, such as, Tentacruel. So we'll talk about that deck very soon as well. But this deck list is very straightforward. I think that this is a pretty great deck to get started with if you're still new. And one of the coolest things about playing these No EX decks too is that they can be used in some of the challenges that are against the AI. So definitely keep these in mind, and obviously feel free to tweak and change any of the cards that you may want to. Now, one of the cool things I want to use on PokemonMeta.com, which is the website that I'm using to show these decks, is I want to show you that you can actually draw test hands. So again, you can kind of see some of the different hands that you might come across, just shuffle it up, new hand, and then again, you can continue seeing just some of the different new hands that you might come across just to kind of get a feel for the deck before you even queue into it. But again, if you are building a deck for No EX, one of the first things you need to think about is, how does it do against Blaine? Can it compete against Blaine? And again, it deals anywhere from 90 to 120 damage, which basically knocks out in one shot almost every Pokemon in this format. Now, there are a few exceptions, but again, very strong deck. One of the biggest weaknesses it has is the fact that 90 HP is not a ton. And also 100 HP is not necessarily super thick. So, you got to keep that in mind. 100 HP is definitely solid. But again, Ninetales having 90 HP does leave it in range to get one hit knocked out or one hit KO'd by some Pokemon in this format. All right, let's take a look at another deck. So another very popular deck that has just kind of came onto the scene is going to be Wigglytuff with Melmetal. Now, because this deck is still relatively new, it's still gaining popularity because, again, the Jigglypuff did add a lot to this deck. And one of the first weaknesses that I'll point out about this deck is the 50 HP on Jigglypuff. That leaves you really prone to being knocked out very early if you're going first and your opponent plays things like Farfetch'd and Giovanni, which, by the way, is another reason why 2 Giovannis, in my opinion, is necessary in Blaine's decks. So when you take a look at this deck, Melmetal is going to be the card that is going to be able to sweep a lot of decks. With 130 HP, it's able to survive a Blaines Ninetales attack because of the special Pokemon ability it has, even though it does have a weakness to fire. So it's going to be left at 10 HP. So one of the biggest counters that you can do to beat Melmetal if you're playing Blaine is to make sure that you try to deal at least 10 to 20 damage, and hopefully they don't potion it away before your Ninetales comes in. Now, how does the deck actually play? Well, the deck plays pretty smooth. You can, get pretty lucky sometimes with Jigglypuff putting things to sleep, and then immediately put down a Wigglytuff and start dealing, 60 damage per turn while you build up your Meltan into a Melmetal. So this deck is really cool, and again, it does have some pretty fun, synergies with sleeping things and then evolving things and then being able to attack things. It's got the heal factor as well with the potions, and this is probably one of the stronger decks in the entire format just because Melmetal is an absolute house. It's an absolute unit, it's an absolute tank, and it's going to one-shot almost everything in the entire meta and live to tell about it even after your opponent attacks it, maybe even 2 or 3 times. So again, very strong deck, and these are decks that may be really fun to play around with, especially if you like Melmetal and you just haven't gotten a chance to play with it a ton. So again, really cool deck, really creative deck. I wouldn't have thought of it, but it did take home 1 tournament already in the very short lifespan that it's had. So this actually is one of the coolest decks in terms of you can tell somebody spent a lot of time making sure that the breakpoints for the damage hit just right. So this deck is going to be a combination of Greninja and Tentacruel. Now, one of the first things that I want to point out is the fact that Tentacruel can one-hit knock out a Vulpix on turn 2. So it can basically deal 20 for 1 energy, but because of the weakness, it's going to deal 40. And with Giovanni, it deals 50. So Tentacruel can single-handedly just donk your opponent if they're playing Blaines. And that's one of the first instances you'll see of this deck being very good into Blaine. The next instance you'll see is with Tentacruel. Tentacruel will deal 50 damage and poison a Ninetales. Now, why does that matter? Well, 50 turns into 70 because of weakness, and then 10 from the poison. So that means if you have Giovanni and Tentacruel, you can knock out a Ninetales as soon as you see it in the active with Tentacruel. So very cool. Now there's other instances where cards like Greninja can come in and also take care of Ninetales in one shot, because again, the Water Shuriken is going to deal 20 to it, and then the Mist Slash is going to deal 80 to it. So one of the cool things about this is it also knocks out Rapidash that's at 100 HP. So this deck is very engineered to beat Blaine. And with Greninja's ability to snipe things for 20 damage, it can finish things off that are on the bench. Frogadier is not too bad either. If you look at the math, again, 30 damage for 1 energy. If it's a fire weakness, you're going to go ahead and get... if it's a fire type and it has a weakness to water, you're going to be dealing 50 damage. So you can do a lot of damage even with just the stage 1 before your Greninja comes down. And in combination with Giovanni, you're potentially dealing as much as 60 damage with a Frogadier. And that can be as early as turn 3 of the entire game. So again, this deck is really cool. It does have the high roll potential with Misty hitting a Tentacruel and being able to get right into the active and attacking. Heck, I mean, you could even put some early pressure by getting a turn 1 Misty with Tentacruel going into Blaine. So this deck is really cool. It's really built to beat Blaine, and generally speaking, if you can beat Blaine, that's a good barometer for how good your deck is. Okay, that means if you can beat Blaine, you most likely can handle a lot of things that are also in the meta. So as we go into some different variations, I would say the rest of these decks are probably slightly weaker or a lot weaker than those first 3 decks, but why not have some fun and just take a look at some of the different brews that people put together. So this is going to be Greninja and Weezing, and it does play dark type energies because again, it's only 1 dark type energy that you need to attack with Weezing, and if you look at Greninja, it only requires 1 water type. And if you look at the Frogadier, it only requires a colorless, so it could be a dark. So again, this is a very flexible deck. You do have the Kogas to soak damage, and this deck can do really well across a lot of matchups, including Blaine. But it's just something that I would probably just rather play Tentacruel personally. But again, this is a cool little option. And again, I didn't show it necessarily for that last deck, but you can see some of the test hands and go over here and kind of play around with this and then kind of see what your hands look like. Again, because of the potential for Koga to be a dead card until you get Weezing, that may be a negative. And so again, I just lean more towards Tentacruel. And also, I hate the idea of having of losing games because I get the wrong energy on the exact turn that I need the right energy. So again, I personally prefer Tentacruel and Greninja out of these two, but hey, that's just me. So moving on, let's also talk about Alakazam and Weezing. So Alakazam and Weezing is a little spicy, and it does play the Psychic Energy and the Dark Energy, but you'll notice it also plays a Old Amber Fossil, right? So that allows you to basically protect your Abra as you build it up. And, you know, basically if your opponent Sabrina's, well, you can send in the Fossil, and sure, you might be giving up a point, but you're protecting your win condition. Alakazam can take care of most things in the format in one shot, including Melmetal. Because it's such a powerful attacker, a lot of the games that you're able to get a Alakazam, you know, on curve and attacking, you're most likely going to win a lot of those games. But again, one of the issues that you're going to run into is, hey, how often are you going to see that stage 2 on curve, and then how often are you going to lose a game because maybe you don't find the whole family of the stage 2. Still, a really strong deck and a really solid contender for the no EX format. Another popular deck, and everybody loves, you know, Dragonite. Okay, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people love Dragonite. And this, when people introduced the no EX format, the first thing that popped up in a lot of people's minds is, oh man, Dragonite has a chance to be good. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's still not very good. But there's some different ways that you can play it, and I'm going to show you those ways. The first way is with Weezing. This time I want to make sure that I point out, you do not play Darkness type energy. The whole role of the Coughing and Weezing and Koga engine is to absorb damage while you find your evolution pieces and evolve for your Dragonite. And because a lot of no EX Pokemon have low HP, Dragonite can actually make quick work and deal a lot of damage before it gets knocked out. So this is a really solid deck if you can get it going, but again, you're just going to run into those issues where you get all of the same type of energy, or you just don't find the Dragonite on time, and you're going to probably lose some games to that. So even though we would like for Dragonite to be good, or a lot of us would, it's still kind of iffy, right? It's still just not very good. But another way that you could play Dragonite is with Hypno, and this allows you to put your opponent's Pokemon to sleep if you get lucky, and then hopefully they stay asleep while you build your Dragonite. And again, it's not taking up any psychic energy, you're only playing the electric and water, and you can use potions to keep your Hypnos alive, you can use potions to keep your Dratini, Dragonair, or Dragonite alive, and you can basically say, hey, I'm going to put all my eggs in one basket, which is the basket that Dragonite is flying around with. So again, not necessarily going to be the best deck, but I know some people love Dragonite, so just giving you some different options just in case you wanted to play Dragonite. And again, hey, feel free to test out these hands and shuffle around and kind of see. And again, Hypno is pretty cool sometimes when you get them out and you're able to really stall, and sometimes, you know, 100 HP is pretty thick in this format in some cases too, unless you're playing against Blaines Ninetales. I think this is the last version of Dragonite that I'm going to go over. Maybe I have one more, but this is the Lapras in Dragonite engine. It does feature a Meowth, which you could easily cut, and you know, for another card that you may think is more helpful. But this is really interesting because basically you're already using water energy, right? So you can use your Lapras to fight back against Blaine for 1 energy, or maybe you high roll with Misty while you build up and find your Dragonite family. This could be a really cool deck. It's had, you know, a little bit of success in some of the non-EX tournaments, but again, I'm not sure which Dragonite version I would say is the best. At first I used to think it was the Weezing engine, and then I was like, okay, maybe Hypno's really good. And then you see this version for no EX specifically, you're like, hey, maybe this is actually the best one. So I'm not sure. I don't know. Tell me what you think. What's the best Dragonite version? Maybe I didn't even cover the best Dragonite version in your opinion, but you know, I'm curious. What do people think about it? And again, there's just some test hands. Pretty interesting deck. So let's get into some other decks. This is a fighting type deck, and I've got a few fighting type decks just in case you like playing these fighting type decks. And one of the first no EX tournaments that we saw, Machamp actually had a lot of success because it was able to survive a Blaines Ninetales, and then it could immediately knock it out. So if you're not even familiar with the base Machamp, the base Machamp has 150 HP, which that's about as good as it gets in the no EX format. I think Poliwrath is the other Pokemon that's 150 150 HP. And so again, and maybe Venusaur, I forgot exactly the stats of Venusaur, but nobody plays Venusaur and grass type in general because of Blaine. But basically, Machamp on curve is still one of the strongest things that you can do if you evolve it on curve and you attach an energy to it. The only thing is you kind of feel yourself being all in after that, right? But in this format, it can be something that you can get away with. If you also pair it with a monster like Sandslash, you actually have a really solid backup attacker that can come in and also deal 70 damage. Now, if you factor in Giovanni, you could potentially be dealing as much as 80 damage with Sandslash. So your damage ceiling is anywhere from 70 to 110 when you factor Machamp and Sandslash. Don't forget the potions in this deck to help you get an extra turn, so maybe you can deal some extra damage to knock out your opponent's Pokemon. Really solid fighting deck. I would argue it's probably the most consistent because it doesn't necessarily rely on, you damaging yourself like a Mankey. It doesn't necessarily rely on coin flips. It's a pretty straightforward linear deck, right? For better or worse. Another deck that you could try with Machamp could be with Mankey and Primeape. Let's just say that you want your early game attacker to be Mankey and Primeape, and then you want your finisher to be Machamp. Well, this is the deck for you. Now keep in mind that strategy could work for Sandslash as well, but here's just another option just in case you're really a Primeape fan, or you really value the fact that Primeape can do 100 damage and potentially knock out things like Ninetales and like Rapidash. So when you take a look at this deck, it's really solid. It's one of the better fighting decks that you can build in this format, and you may really enjoy playing it. And again, hey, not bad on the sample hands. Again, depending on if you go first or second, there's definitely some strengths, but again, it's just a cool deck that you can play around with. The last fighting deck that I'll go over with you is going to be Sandslash and Primeape. So this is a lower ceiling, however, it is a little bit more consistent because it doesn't require stage 2s. This is just a pair of stage 1 Pokemon that deal massive amounts of damage for the format, right, very quickly. Now keep in mind, you will get one shot by Ninetales in every single one of these occasions, assuming they have something like Giovanni. But again, Ninetales is just that big bad monster you can't really do anything about. It's just, you got to live with it. You got to make your deck be able to beat it. And so that's why a lot of people prefer Machamp in decks like this. But this is just another option just in case you don't have a Machamp. And hey, maybe you like this. So this is a deck that I actually have been cooking with, and I want to give you a little game theory before I let you go and I wrap this video up. My game theory behind normal Pokemon is this. Normal Pokemon are very tanky. 100 HP makes your opponent's Blaines have to play things like Giovanni and have to sometimes waste their Blaines on your normal Pokemon. Also, Pokemon like Kangaskhan have the ability to one-hit knockout if they flip double heads as early as turn 2 of the game, which can just immediately swing the game in your favor. Also, Pokemon like Tauros deal 50 damage for 2 energy, and with the help of Giovanni can deal 60 damage. I've had some very interesting interactions where Tauros goes heads up against a Rapidash and Tauros comes out on top because I'm able to potion away and stay out of that Blaine breakpoint. So again, I think Tauros and Kangaskhan are really good. I think they have a lot of good bulk, and you may be scared off by the retreat cost, or you may be scared off of Tauros being 2 energy. But again, in a format like this, you do have time to get there, and you're able to deal damage in a very nice way, as well as have a little bit of bulk to survive a lot of things in the format. One of the biggest weaknesses with these normal basic type Pokemon is status effects. So cards like Wigglytuff and cards like Hypno can really do a lot of damage to my Kangaskhan's and Tauroses if I'm not able to flip heads and stay awake. The other side of this deck is going to be the Tentacruel deck. And again, my whole thought process is I want to be able to beat Blaine. If I can beat Blaine, I can probably handle a lot of the other decks in the format. And with the bulk that my Pokemon have, from 100 HP to 110 HP, there's a lot of chances that I'm going to be able to survive and be able to fight back into games. With cards like Potion and cards like Giovanni, I'm able to fix damage and hopefully maneuver in a way that can help me win the game. So again, this is one of my favorite decks so far. And again, if you've been watching me on Twitch, I've been playing a lot of normal Pokemon in my No EX decks, and I personally think they're very underrated. I do not think that people are using these enough. Now, there's some decks that just can't really use them, like Blaines Ninetales can't really use these Pokemon. They're better off using things like Farfetch'd. But in my opinion, these normal basic Pokemon are really good in No EX, and I think you should definitely give them a shot. Check out some of these hands. So first turn Kangaskhan. If you're playing against fire, you're going to have that potential for a one-hit knockout as soon as turn 1 by putting that Tentacruel in the active and using Giovanni to knock out a Vulpix. Let's shuffle and see another hand. So another hand. So this hand is going to be very cool because you're going to have that Tauros, so you know you're going to be able to tank some hits. If you're going second, you know that you're going to be able to start dealing 50 damage very early in the game. And if you're going first, well, guess what? It's okay. You have bulk. With that 100 HP, you have the ability to poke a ball, maybe set up a Tentacruel for your second turn, and then you can pivot into Tentacruel. And also you have cards like Research, which every deck plays, right? So again, I just really like this deck, and you know, again, you just kind of scroll through these hands. Kangaskhan turn 1, a lot of pressure early, and yes, it's going to stink when you flip tails or double tails, but that's just a part of the game. You know, you can't win every game, but you can at least give yourself a really good chance based on the cards that you play and the way that you sequence them to give yourself a good chance to win the game. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you kind of enjoy, you know, seeing the different ways that you can play these decks in the No EX format. And hey, maybe I missed a deck. Let me know in the comments a deck that you may want to see me talk about, maybe see some hands on here. And you'll notice I didn't do any power rankings just yet. But again, I do think that the first 3 decks that I covered are definitely the decks to beat as of right now. So thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you taking time out of your day for me to be background noise. Maybe it was entertainment, maybe you learned something. And if you stay tuned to the end of the video, there's going to be some new videos popping up on the screen right now, including a video where I talk about what the next mini set may be. Very, very interesting. Peace.